На трибунах аллеют знамена, облака в поднебесье плывут. На зеленом ковре стадиона разноцветные майки цветут.
Hello and welcome back to the Russian Football News Podcast. Since we last recorded, Game Week 30 took place as the RPL season came to an end. Thus, as we all know, Zenit won their third RPL title in a row, while Spartak joined them in the Champions League next season. Lokomotiv qualified for the Europa League, bumped up courtesy of their Cup of Russia win, while Rubin Kazan and Sochi secured the last European places and will take part in the inaugural European Conference League next season. Down at the bottom, already relegated Tambov were joined by Rota Volgograd. Tambov themselves are going bust and will no longer exist as an entity, while Rota drops back down into the Finale despite some late brave results. Ufa and Arsenal Tula hung on to their RPL status by the skin of their teeth, as due to licensing issues in the Finale, no promotion or relegation playoffs will be taking place this year. However, this week it is time for us to do one of our favourite annual traditions, in which we hand out the RFN Awards for the end of season of 2020-21. To join me in doing so is David Sanson.
Good evening.
And Richard
Good evening,
Pike.
David. Good evening, James. How are we all?
I'm good. I mean, next week, a few of us will be taking some short vacations, so to fill in the gap for everyone, we will be having a shorter pre-recorded episode in which we also hand out some RFN Awards for the end of the season too. But firstly, onto the categories for the RPL Awards, and they are Player of the Season, Young Player of the Season, Best Manager, Biggest Surprise, Player or Team, Best Signing, Worst Signing, Best Moment, Worst Moment, Goal of the Season, and then the most Leonid Slutsky moment of the decade, and the most bankrupt club of the last decade too. Now, the two last categories we do have preset nominations, and we will try and pick a winner, but for all of the rest, we won't pick one overall winner, but just merely discuss our own personal picks for each award. And I would like to hear from yourselves what your personal choices are for them. Just hit us up at RFN, at Russ Football News on Twitter, through the DMs, tweets, whatever, and let us know some of your personal choices and whether you agree or not. So first, on to the Player of the Season. David, who do you think for Player of the Season this year then?
I had a few picks, but towards the top, of course, I think we can't not have Artyom Zuba up there. Top scorer again in the RPL. I think he's now the all-time top scorer in the RPL. And he did have a great season. And then up there also I had Christian Noboa. He was unbelievable for Sochi. No one would have expected Sochi top 5 at all, I don't think. And he was fantastic. And Zhigos Kukoviak as well. He had a really good, particularly second half of the season. Where Loco went on that insane run of wins, and he was scoring left, right, and centre, as well as Kamara and Smolov. But he also had a good first half of the season. And those are my sort of top three: Zuba, Noboa, and Kukoviak.
And Richard?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Jordan Larson as my player of the season. I felt he scored decisive goals and some very, very good goals for Spartak too. The one against Himki in the penultimate round when, Spartak were drawing 1-1 and they needed a win to put themselves in prime position for that Champions League spot, and Larson just stole the show late on. So I'm going to go with him. I was tempted to go with Vlasic, but I think his form just dropped in the last 7, 8, 9 games of the season. If he'd have carried on that form pre-winter break, I think Vlasic probably would have been mine, but I am actually going to go with Jordan Larson just because I think he interlinks so well with the likes of Promes and Sobolev in Spartak's attack after the winter break, and scored lots of decisive goals. Some good shouts there from David. I also thought Noboa had an excellent season for Sochi. And I think Azmoun and Zuba have to be worth shouts. It's a bit of a shame the likes of Wendell and Malcolm couldn't have had fully fit seasons, because if they'd have had fully fit seasons, I think they might have been in contention. especially I was really impressed with Wendell when he finally got out there on the
Yeah.
pitch and was fit, and just hope him and Malcolm can stay fit and injury free for next season and beyond. So yeah, they're probably some of my shouts, but I'm going to go with Jordan Larson just because I was really impressed with the impact he made and the goals he scored and in decisive moments too.
Yeah, definitely. I think all of these names are deserved mentions for player of the season. I mean, I mentioned it to yourselves off air before we started recording, and I was really torn between two, and it was either Sardar Azmoun or Larson, like you said, Richard. And I think I did go Larson in the end, but I'm not sure how much of that is my own Spartak favoritism and bias. But I think what really teetered me over the edge, and perhaps it is unfair to bring European form into this when I can't do that with Larson purely because Spartak weren't good enough to be in the Zenit's position last season. But Azmoun's European form really irks me, and he had that spell around that time of playing in Europe where domestically Zenit really fell off, and one of the large reasons why they did fall off is because Azmoun did have a little bit of a dry spell. So I have went for Larson because of his ability to create as well as score. He's a real top-class player, and I think is going to be one of the next big exports out of the league. But ahead of Larson, I think the real player of the season is probably Khalid Kadyrov. Kadyrov had arguably the best season of his career, in which he played 5 games, which is the most games he's ever played. He had an average of 14 minutes per game, which is by far and away the longest he's ever been on the pitch. He actually managed a shot on goal this time as well, and an average of 6 touches per game. So I think he's really proven his uncle's old faith in putting him in on the bench for every single ACMAT game since the beginning of time, with that one shot in his entirety of his whole adult career as a 27-year-old. But no, joking aside, it's Larson for me as well, and maybe that is my Spartak bias in there. But David, young player of the season, I think we can all perhaps telegraph where this one's going.
I don't know what you mean. I was going to pick Roman Yevgenyev. No.
Oh, well.
He was obviously... I had Yevgenyev and Zakarian up there in my top 3, but of course my top choice was Kvicha Kvaratskhelia. He's had a fantastic season, and it seems like he's not going to have any more RPL seasons. All the talk is that he's definitely going to be off this summer, which is no surprise really. But yeah, fantastic season, and what a boy, what a talent he is. So yeah, he's definitely my young player of the season.
Yeah, and for those as well, the age limit here was 21, so a little bit lower than usually is 23. But we only considered players under the age of 21 and below. I agree. Before I segue to Richard, I think my player of the season is Kvicha as well. It was a little bit of a toss up between him and Igor Diveyev, another Russian central defender. I think's really blossomed this year, even in the second half of the season. I think he was Siska's best player under the PE teacher. So it was a close run thing, but this is Kvicha's breakthrough season outside of Russia, and it's really not often that happens. That is a generational thing when you see a player breach beyond the sort of echo chamber of Russian football, because we are kind of a little bit of a sundered land. We are like left adrift a little bit sometimes by European football experts. And I think there was a video that got millions of hundreds of thousands of views at least that went viral, and it was like something along the lines of Kvicha plays football like a PlayStation or like a FIFA game, something like along those lines. And it really does kind of, although it's a little bit embarrassing and a little bit cringe, it really genuinely does describe his style of game and why he is so exciting. Richard, who have you got for our young player of the season?
I had Kvicha down as number 2. Just feel that, over the season he's progressed.
Scandal.
I had Kvicha as number 2. It was very, very close between him and Arsene Zakarian, and perhaps because I covered Dynamo quite a bit, I covered Dynamo for the site. I did just go with Zakarian based on his age, but I think Kvicha had it was really, really tight between the two of them. And I know, and that those goals he scored in the international break, And like we were saying, he actually tore Pedro Porro, who's won a Portuguese title with Sporting this season in Portugal. He played at right back for Spain that game, and and there were times in that game where he tore Pedro Porro apart. And those goals really enhance his reputation. And all season he's been improving on the Slutsky. That's one of Slutsky's great strengths as a coach, as we've said on numerous pods before. He improves players. There's quite a number of those who've been players this season who've really improved under his tutelage. And yeah, be a very interesting summer to see where he does actually end up going, because I do have a feeling that Rubin are going to find it very difficult to keep him this summer, but he's definitely going to get them a big transfer fee, that's for sure. But I went with Zakarian. I did go with Zakarian because I was really impressed in the second half of the season how this guy who, literally at the start of the season, in the first few months of the season, was probably alternating his playing time between the 19s at Dinamo and the reserves. And at 17, to just come into a side and just look so at ease, just like he's been playing there for a good few years, for him and Chukavin basically to be holding up, Dinamo's attacking play at times was remarkable, considering some of the experienced players that Dinamo have got in the attacking third. I really thought it was remarkable, and such maturity, such composure at just 17. To win himself a place in the Sbornaya squad for the Euros. He could be the youngest ever player to be capped by Russia, and one of the youngest ever if you include the Soviet times. I thought was remarkable, and he did a good solid job at the under-21 Euros as well. Even when Sebastian Szymanski's not played for Dinamo, he's dropped into a slightly deeper role in midfield too, so he's showing his versatility impressively. So I just went with Zakarian based on his age, but it was very, very close between him and Kvicha. I was impressed with both of them, but probably the Dinamo bias showing a little bit. But I was really impressed with the pair of them. I just went with
I think that's fair. I think the way that he's burst onto the scene this year was unexpected, and he's been brilliant for Dinamo. Now he was given a chance by Sandro Schwarz, who is a coach who favours giving youngsters a chance, as he's has shown throughout his whole tenure at Dinamo and before that at Mainz as well. But what's really brought me attention to why Zakarian was my third choice, I believe, behind Deveyev as well. And I only didn't decide because of he's only really been involved in the latter half of the season, which is 10 matches, not the first 2/3.
Yeah, that was my reasoning too.
But if he's forced his way into Stani Cherchesov's national team side, even if it is just the initial bigger squad before it gets whittled down to the final 26, he's 17 and he's managed to do that. There's players who have been playing week in, week out for a couple of years now at a very high standard for both the under-21s team and the domestic side, and Stani's just completely ignored them. So to get into that team has showed the impact that he's made and what the expectations are of him from the wider community. And you were saying there, David, that you thought it was just the amount of playing time that held him against from winning as well.
Yeah, I mean, he's an unbelievably talented player, but just for a whole seasonal thing, he only made his debut in December, so I think I put that against him. It's enough that he's in my top three, but that was the only thing against him, and I really look forward to seeing him with a whole season under his belt. 13. I think he had 13 appearances this season and got I want to say 3 goals and 4 assists, which is unbelievable. And the fact that he's in the Euro squad. Stani doesn't do these kind of call-ups. The fact that he's there makes me think that he's actually going to be in the final thing. Because the first squad is not that big. He's only got to trim a couple of players, hasn't he, I think. So, I think he might go and I think he might play. At the very least, he'll play in the friendlies, I think. I've got belief that he wouldn't have called him up unless he actually had the belief that, this guy needs to be in my team. Because that's not the kind of guy that Stani is. He doesn't do risky things like that. So, I think there's genuine belief in the Russian setup that this guy is unbelievably good.
Yeah, certainly. And Stani's only named a squad of 30 with the 7 reserves as an aside from that. So there's only 4 players going to get dropped from that. Unfortunately, I think it will be the 4 youngsters, which would be a shame, but it's the easiest decision to make, and he likes experience. He holds experience very high, and in what he believes a repertoire of what creates a solid international team. But if we move on to the next one, and that is manager of the season. Now I'll go first here myself, and I think there's a few very solid candidates. Of course, it can't have a manager of the season debate without mentioning Sergei Semak's domestic record, leading Zenit to a treble. Absolutely unbelievable achievement, brilliant. Just created what is such a respectfully efficient machine up there. I think we mentioned this quite a lot, and while we're mentioning it, it's also we need to be careful not to anachronistically remove away some of the quality of football that Zenit play, because a lot of people say that they play boring football. Now, I don't think they play boring football. I just think there's a misnomer out there regarding Zenit. There's that efficient equals boring, and it's not necessarily, really not necessarily the case. I think you go no further than watching the manner of goal and the quality of goal in the way that they completely and absolutely dismantled Lokomotiv in the second last game of the season to basically end any chance of anyone else getting close to them winning it, stopping them winning it for the third time in a row. But having said that, once again, the European record is heavy weighing in the back of the mind, and I think it's probably fair to say that a lot of Zenit fans themselves have been quite conflicted with Semak and his complete and utter lack of success at the European level. And it is very similar to Shakhtar's long period of dominance in Ukraine, to PSG's even, to Celtic's, when these clubs have all went on long periods of domestic dominance where that domestic success is almost an afterthought because it is guaranteed, because they are so good. And it's easy to forget why they are considered like that, but they are also all judged on how they do in Europe, and each one of those clubs I've mentioned, like Zenit, have all struggled in different ways at different levels with completely different perspectives. If Zenit do what PSG do every year, then they'll be absolutely delighted, but it's just coming from a completely different place with a completely different aims and point of view. So that's constantly in the back of my mind, and I just wanted to quickly mention a little shout out for Semak and Zenit's success this season. I could go through others, but I'm sure you both could mention it when you discuss, but I'll go straight into mine, and it's by quite some distance Vladimir Fedotov at Sochi. I think the job he's done and where he came from doing it is just absolutely brilliant. I don't think I've seen such quite an impact that a manager has had on what was essentially a disparate group of players dragged around from lower leagues. RPL also runs. I mean, you've got players who have played most of their career in the FNL and been average at best. Zenit cast-offs. People like Nikita Burmistrelov, who has spent most of the career in the RPL just as, not really a joke figure, but just eminently forgettable by most pundits, not really making very much of an impact at a plethora of different clubs. And he's brought that together, unified it around a 36-year-old Ecuadorian who is one of the, if not the best foreigner to grace Russian football in the last decade or so in terms of longevity of what he's done at the different clubs he's done it at and pure success. Nobody saw that coming, and I think Fedotov is one of the central parts to that, to holding it together. He is the glue that holds Sochi together, because it certainly isn't moving down to Sochi, and it certainly isn't Rotenberg in charge. David, who have you got for manager of the season?
Yeah, I had Fedotov. I was struggling between Fedotov, Slutsky, and Nikolic as maybe as the backup. We can't ignore the fact that Nikolic made Lokomotiv competitive in Europe. They really put up a good fight against Bayern and Atletico. And then obviously, that first off season, at the halfway stage they were 9th, or going into the winter break they were 9th, and then they won 11 games in a row, or something like that, something mad, whatever it was. And have come in the top 3. And he did, he's done a good job with some players there who we thought were, dead players like Smolov or Kamano. So he was up there. But yeah, we can't ignore the fact that Slutsky and Fedotov have pulled up teams who were in the bottom half last season and taken them into Europe. They've both done excellent jobs. That ragtag group at Sochi of guys like Zaika and Terekhov and Yusupov. I mean, the fact they got a full season out of Yusupov uninjured was a miracle. Zabolotny. I mean, these are guys. It's a bit like the Rostov season, right? The Rostov season, the squad was a ragtag group, and ultimately only 3 or 4 of that group were good enough to go and do something at the next level. And it's a bit the same here. I feel like half the squad are at their level, but they just work in this system. And maybe only a handful of them will go on and could take a next step up. Clubs need to just be wary. Zabolotny is apparently going to go off to Siska, which is let's not even talk about it. I mean,
it's weird.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen him flop at Zenit once already.
Yeah,
I don't see it. I've never rated him. He's a bit like I see. He's a bit like Ali Sal almost for me, where he doesn't seem like he's in control of his feet a lot of the time. He just is. He's just a pure power striker. I mean, he's more mobile than some of the bigger strikers, some of the other big strikers. Sorry, but it's enough about him. We're on to manager. So yeah, Ruben Bias would obviously lead me to Slutsky, but otherwise it's Slutsky or Fedotov.
And what was Slutsky's impact? Just to quickly cover Slutsky, do you think a lot of the reason as to why Ruben finished 4th and getting the best out of a young set of players, which, in my opinion, what Slutsky does best, was all the reason behind the success? Was it centered around Slutsky?
We've taken points off of all the big teams this season. Zenit only lost 3 times this season. Ruben 2 of those victories against them. We've taken points from Spartak, Siska as well. The only team who we struggled at, the big lot, was Loco. When you look at how from when he took over, I was looking at our sort of points per game per average, and under Sharonov, we were absolutely just dreadful. But yeah, he's taken this squad. At Ruben, you've got sort of 3 seasons. You've got Slutsky's the manager. He just will control stuff on the pitch. You then got Yarovinsky above, who's controlling the transfers and bringing the squad together. And obviously they go everywhere. They were at Hull together. They were at Vitesse together. And then you've got the board above who are supporting them. And Slutsky has taken that squad of guys, a lot of them young guys, inexperienced guys, and a couple of other guys who are older, like Zotov or Dupin. Zotov had an unbelievable season, and you wouldn't be saying that from a guy who, I think his last club was at Orenburg, and he came in on a free transfer. So, he's really turned the club around. We know he's a good manager. We've seen it over the years. He won the league with Siska. He did well at Hull ultimately, even though he then was sacked, because then they went on and did worse after he left. And yeah, he's proven it this season with his trusting guys like Makarov, Smoshnikov, Kvicha, and so on. So it's just a pleasure to have him managing the team that I support. He's such a character as well, which we'll get onto. But yeah.
And of course, Roman Sharonov is now having his little holiday as one of the first team coaches at Paphos, in a team who are mid-table in Cyprus. But Richard, manager of the season, perhaps a little bit of a shout out for Kimki's manager after all he's succeeded and achieved since he took over.
Yeah, I'm actually. It's funny because we've with the performances in Europe this season, we've criticised a lot of the Russian managers who've been managing the league this season, haven't we? And yeah, I want to shout out to Cherevchenko at Himki. I think he's done a very good job. Considering how poor they looked at the start of the season under Dmitry Gunko, and how he's just revived them, and getting the best out of players like Kirill Bozhinov, who's just signed for Rostov just yesterday. Apparently the fee was €100,000. I had a look on Transfermarkt earlier, and that's apparently the fee. Getting a tune out to Konate, who's also moved to Atmat, left them and moved to Atmat on a free. He did well with Glushakov, getting a tune out of Miertsov as well. and some other good and some other players he revived, like Brian Adowu, Dimitri Tichy, I thought had quite a good season for them. And the goalkeeper Landratov. So yeah, I think a good shout out to Cherevchenko. I think he really revitalised Himki. He's probably one of 5 actually that impressed me over the course of the season. The other 4, 3 of them we've mentioned, all for varying reasons. Slutsky's very good at getting hold of players and coaching them to improve, as we've seen with Kvicha, Makarov, and several others. I really like the way Nikolic improved Loco after the winter break, started getting a tune out to the likes of Smolov and Kamano. His performances in Europe were good as well. The 2 ties against Atletico Madrid, the brave game at home against Bayern in the Champions League, against Salzburg away as well. He's up there with that. And, Fedotov, I really like the way Sochi play, this quick transition between the lines. That style that he's implemented at Sochi has been really good. And like you said, James, getting the best out of Fenel, Journeyman. And, when Noboa went there, I really honestly thought that was it. I thought he was just winding down. But, he's been one of the best players of the season, in that midfield role. However, there's one other name I'm going to mention too, and it is actually Domenico Tedesco. I think, he also deserves a strong mention too for the way he improved Spartak. And it's just so gutting that he's going back to Germany. I understand why he's going back, obviously for family reasons. I totally understand that. But I really would have just loved to have seen Tedesco get one more year with this team. I really honestly think he's made a lot of progress. I think Spartak were they 7th or 8th last season, and they've gone up to 2nd, so that's a huge improvement too. He's forged a good partnership between Jordan Larson and Sobolev. It was interesting as well how over the course of the season, Tedesco, saw that Sobolev was making improvements, and he had the brave ball move to put him in the first team ahead of Ponce at start. Ponce was playing well with Larson, but then, he obviously, through training, discovered that Sobolev, was worthy of a couple of starts. He got a couple of starts, took them, and then he's forged a good partnership with Larson. I really like, the faith he's shown in that in some of the young players at Spartak, and just his character, Tedesco. I really enjoy his character. He was, good natured on the sidelines, always entertaining. And, I love the team spirit he fostered at Spartak alongside the improvement in results. So, yeah, probably those 5 names that I'm going to mention there. It was tight between all of them, I think. I think on the Whatever This Is podcast earlier in the week, I went with Tedesco. But, yeah, I think I'm going to shout out to all 5 of those names. Cherevchenko, Slutsky, Fedotov, Nikolic, and Tedesco, I think.
Yeah, I like Cherevchenko's work at Khimki. I think the problem why I didn't choose him, though, is because, yes, he's done very well with them. They have had, the 2nd or 3rd best record this calendar year so far in the entirety of Russia. But, entirety of RPL, sorry. But Khimki's side last year was a very good side, a very talented side in the RPL. They didn't win it, but they looked like they were ready. There was a team of a solid, cohesive group of youngsters who you thought, they can make the next step up. If they stay together and if they keep the manager. Obviously, they didn't keep the manager. Unfortunately, Talalayev left before the end of the season to take over Krylia for a while. And then they replaced Talalayev with what's a pair of frauds, really, in Ural and Gunko. Neither of which are anywhere near good enough. And those players really suffered from Gunko's complete and utter ineptitude. He was terrible at Spartak, utterly awful. And then as soon as Cherevchenko came back in, brought a semblance of leadership and a little bit of organisation in, and just coupled alongside that, bringing in some real RPL experience and Glushakov and Milosov, who were players who struggled at Spartak, and one of which is despised at Spartak. But if they're the big fish in a little pond, you can really see them being successful. And Cherevchenko, as you said, he's got a real good note out of Kanate as well. I think Kanate is a little bit of a mess in front of goal at times. A few very nice finishes here or there aside. But as a target man, he's very, very effective. And I think he does a lot of the dirty work that allows Mirzov, Glushakov and Ilya Kukarchuk to shine a little bit more. And in that, I'm discussing Khimki because it is a little segue to the next topic, which is surprise player or team. And it's not Khimki. But one of my names on the shortlist was actually Ilya Kukarchuk, who has been nothing short of brilliant at times for Khimki this season. And while I did honestly expect a little bit of Milzov to react the way he has, because look, Milzov was a joke at Spartak, but if anything, he was more a victim of circumstance and a victim of Spartak, kind of the churn of Spartak. Sometimes you get players who go to Spartak and they become legends and they really thrive and they're allowed to thrive, but other ones who are not really welcomed. And he was, of course, favoured by Oleg Kononov, so he was backs against the wall from the start. But as soon as he got out of there, he showed solid form. But Kukarchuk, I just did not expect to really honestly carry on his form into the RPL. I mean, he's 30 now. He has been in the RPL and around the FNL for a very long time. I remember when he was back at Angie coming through as a youngster. I think he was dropped from Rubin, David, wasn't it, before he found his way to Angie. But he, at the time when Angie had all the money, he was really highly rated. And then kind of fell away to nothing. I think he ended up playing for like 3 different clubs in 2 seasons, like all around Siberia. I think he ended up like Ural for a while and Shenik and then Spartak and Alchik and became an FNL journeyman. But then for the last year or so, he's been absolutely brilliant. And that, to be honest, because of what's happened in the past, I didn't expect him to carry it on. So he's one real solid surprise of the season. But I think it would be remiss if I didn't mention that my personal surprise of the season is, of course, Christian Noboa. I agree with what you both said earlier, where I thought this really would be just his settling into the twilight of his career. All of his kids are growing up. They're both Russian. His wife's Russian. He's 36 now. Moved down south to Sochi, earn a decent wage. Enjoys time in the sun. Maybe watch a little bit of F1 when it comes around, and kind of slowly retire. And absolutely credit to him, because he's been anything but. It's almost like he's got the bit between his teeth to prove that his spell at Zenit was an aberration, and that he is still the classy player that was seen turning out for Rubin over a decade ago, and beating Barcelona, and then again for Rostov, beating Bayern Munich, both in the Champions League, and now he is leading Sochi to Europe for the first time in their history as their highest goal scorer, I believe, when he's got just under 20 goals and assists in 25 games in the league this season. So unbelievable reaction that was just totally and completely out of the blue. Richard, your surprise of the season?
Yeah, I've got a number of those, and as you're probably not going to be surprised, probably Himki and Sochi comprise a lot of them. I'm going to agree with you there, James, on Noboa. It's just absolutely splendid. I honestly thought, like you, I thought that move to Sochi was just a bit of a wind down. I never thought at 36 he'd still be producing some excellent football, the kind of football he was producing 10, 11 years earlier when he was at Rubin, winning 2 titles under Berdev. I also want to point out to Artyom Supov, I honestly thought, the injuries probably would have had an impact on him, and he was struggling after he was released by Dinamo, but no, I mean, he's gone down to Sochi, and Fedotov has revived him. I'm going to shout out to Zabolotny too. I really think Zabolotny should have stayed at Sochi. I think he had it good going down there. I mean, he's moved to CSKA now. That move has been confirmed. I'm not really sure how that benefits CSKA personally, or I think he'd have been better off, staying down there at Sochi, being the main man in Fedotov's system. I'm not sure about that move to CSKA. Like I say, he's had his time at Zenit before and it didn't work out. And I think he owes Fedotov a lot. I think Zabolotny for reviving his career, because he was really a bit of a meme when he was at Zenit. So yeah, they're 3 players I want to shout out. I'm going to also shout out 2 players at Himki, Dmitry Tihi, who I think's been really just a good, solid player in the defence. I know he was linked with a few larger RPL clubs in the winter break. I know nothing materialised of it, but I think he's been a good, solid performer for them. I think he's about 27, 28, and good, solid performer. Kirill Bozhinov, who I've been really impressed by. Not just a young player who Himki have picked up from Spartak or Saskar, one of the Moscow clubs. This is the guy who's come through their academy, broke into their team last year in the FNL, and now this season has really established himself. He's in the Russia under-21 squad, and he's got his move to Rostov now. And it's a move Rostov, I think, absolutely should have made, because obviously Kostov is getting quite old. Alexander Kostov is getting quite old at right back for them now. So yeah, I think that's another surprise this season. And finally, Ilya Landratov, really impressed with him. Was not expecting his trajectory to be so high, and I think there's going to be a lot of clubs interested in him. And you could make a feasible argument for a lot of clubs needing a new goalkeeper soon. Saskar Kinfeev's getting older. Anton Shunin's not been quite as good at Dinamo this season, and his contract's supposedly up next season. So maybe even them. Lokomotiv and Zenit are two teams who I think even next season could do with a number one goalkeeper to come in straight away. So be interesting to see what happens on that front. But yeah, probably the players from Himki and Sochi, and as a team narrative, they're probably the two surprise packages of the season in terms of doing well. So yeah, I'll shout out those individual players and teams.
And David, surprise the season?
I actually had Wendell down as my surprise this season. Maybe it's a combination of just not knowing what to expect, and then the first couple of games I was like, well, this guy's nothing special. Like I just thought, how have they spent 20 million on this guy? As the season went on, I was like, okay, this guy's actually really good. He definitely surpassed my expectations, my early expectations that I had for him when he first was signed, and then when I first saw him play for Zenit. So he was one who I had up there. I thought Zotov, I mentioned him earlier, but Georgi Zotov for Rubin. Rubin sort of started the season, and I think everyone assumed that Rubin were going to play Merkulov at left back and Samoshnikov as a right back. Samoshnikov then outperformed Merkulov and stuck him on the bench. And Zotov slotted in and became arguably one of our best players of the season. Like, just absolutely faultless throughout. As I mentioned earlier, it's a guy who's, like a lot of the other guys we mentioned, has spent a lot of his career playing either in the FNL or lower half of the RPL. And yeah, he's just your standard up and down, hard-working fullback. He just runs all game. He will charge up the field for you, run up there, cross the ball in, and sometimes that's what you need a fullback to do. Obviously at a higher level he wouldn't be there, but he really surprised me when I signed him. I just thought he'll just sit on the bench all season, but he ended up being a first name on the sheet kind of player. And then when it came to team, I don't want to keep going on the Rubin bias, but they surprised me, obviously. Sochi, Himki, and then the negative surprise, I think Dinamo dropping off sort of surprised me, because I really thought they were riding that wave. So when they sort of dropped off at the end of the season, I was a bit surprised by that.
Yeah, definitely.
And Ufa's bad start to the season was a surprise as well. That was a terrible start to the season. Like, dreadful. Like, they were bottom at the halfway stage, tied on points with Tambov, and obviously they really turned it around once they got Stukalov in. Yeah,
I think the Rubin fullbacks is a good point, and it's a fair one too, because I remember a conversation we had early on in the season where I not doubted, but I think I said something on the lines of that I was worried about Rubin's fullbacks, because it looked like there was a little bit of a glaring hole in the team there that I thought could be really have been exploited, but it's been anything but. And Samoshnikov in particular, I think, has been really, really impressive and thoroughly deserves his call up to the senior sides. And I would like to finish on surprises that mentioning that Zaharian himself is really a little bit of a surprise, because when the whole Guardian Next Generation list came out, as it does every year, and you excitedly look for Russian players and then take it with a pinch of salt because of some of the players they've had in the past, like Kirill Koznachenko in there and others who really kind of failed to live up to the hype to a certain extent. And then Zaharian's named, and everyone's like, oh, most people are like, who's he? Never really heard of the guy before, and certainly haven't seen him play. And then as the season wore on, he got more and more involved and just got better and better. So I think that would be a good potential surprise. But I'll move on to best signing. And David, you have mentioned that yours is a little Ruben heavy. Well, mine also dips into Ruben here, and it is Djordje Despotovic. I think he's been that leading line that Ruben have needed and sorely missed for a very long time. And he was brilliant last year for Orenburg before he left at the end of the season before the COVID outbreak, before the COVID return, sorry. And it was inevitable that one of the upper mid-table to higher clubs would have got him out of free. And he's rewarded the faith just substantially. He's the captain, or at least is a stand-in captain of Ruben now, and fulcrum of the team, just absolutely brilliant. And a lot of the way that, like Konate to Kimki, but him to Ruben, just even more effective because he's an incredibly talented player in front of goal as well. He is the man that generally makes a lot of the good work happen for Ruben and allows Makarov and Kavicha on either wing to thrive in their totally free counter-attacking roles and play some really exciting stuff. He does the dirty work, and I think on a free transfer from Orenburg, you can't get better value as well as return on the signing. David, best signing?
Yeah, Despot was up there. I also had Victor Moses and Wendell. Obviously, you mentioned Wendell already a couple of times, but Victor Moses, I thought, did a really good job for Spartak. You know, I had a quick flick through and was like, none of the other clubs really made big splashes. Zainutdinov maybe would have been up there had he not been injured. You know, he missed practically the whole second half of the season. I wonder if that was a contributing factor to their downfall. You know, he was very good for them first half, although they were struggling with him. So he would have been up there too. But yeah, Despot, what a guy. But Moses and Wendell, I thought, had good seasons and were good signings also, despite the money on Wendell, that is, as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the money made Wendell's life a little bit harder because he had that price tag on his shoulders, but he's really thrived and managed to shrug that off because the price tag's always going to be there. That'll never change in time. But what you can tell by a player who's adapted to a move with a heavy price tag is that within a couple of months, it's never mentioned. And I think that's the easiest way of getting off your back is by physically just playing well and performing to a standard where everybody forgets and it's just second nature. Richard's best signing?
Yeah, I'm probably gonna go with Despotovic on a free. He obviously showed glimpses of his abilities, talent last season. I think he got 8 goals for a relegated side in Orenburg, and if you can get that many goals for a relegated side in Orenburg, and you surround him with better quality players and a top coach in Slutsky. And just been really impressed with the way he's led the line for Rubin, scored good decisive goals. I love the goal he scored against Dinamo. I think it was a couple of weeks back. I love how he just beat Yevgeniev with his movement and touch and then just slot it into the bottom corner beyond Shunin. And I don't even think Yevgeniev did a lot wrong, really. It was just very, very good centre-forward play. Despotovic has to be probably my sign of the season, considering he cost them absolutely nothing. And, he's been a big difference, because the last couple of seasons, one observation we've probably all had with Rubin is that they've lacked a forward. Well, they've definitely gone out and addressed that problem now, and to do it on a free transfer as well is brilliant business. So, just shows you what a good transfer can change a team's fortunes. So, yeah, I'm going to go with Despotovic. I'll shout out to Moses as well, especially second half of the season. He's brilliant. He's been absolutely brilliant for Spartak. I loved his 2 assists against Arsenal too. The first one, especially when he completely did Nikolai Raskasov down the right side, completely did him, and then sent over a brilliant cross for Sobolev to head home. It looks like he's Spartak have exercised the option on Moses now, which is for a permanent transfer, which is absolutely fantastic news. I'm really delighted that Spartak have done that. But yeah, my sign of the season has to be Despotovic, considering he costs nothing and how he's transformed Rubin's fortunes.
Yeah, Spartak have finished in the top 3, so automatically have activated a clause in Moses' transfer to making the deal permanent. So very good move for them. I must admit, at first, I was at the start of the season as a Spartak fan, and most Spartak fans were like, we don't need a right wing back. Zoblin's been playing out of his skin there, like unbelievably well. And then you move Zoblin in the middle and you miss Umyarov because I quite like Umyarov in the middle, and I think he's got very good potential to really develop even further. But then Moses comes in, and the quality that Moses has, and the way him, Larson, and Promes link up at times is really nice as well. It's kind of reminds me a little bit of a few years ago with Promes, Luis Adriano, and Zeluish in the way that they linked up, where you can tell that these three are very good friends off the pitch, and you can kind of tell that they are because they have this sort of nice chemistry that translates onto the pitch as well, and it's very good to see that flourish. But worst signing for me is Yevgeny Markov at Krasnodar. It didn't make any sense at the time apart from purely for squad depth. Even then, for me, that's a little bit of a stretch because Yevgeny Markov is just a complete waste of space. You might as well be putting a youngster in and at least giving them game time. And I think he's played 7 times in the RPL, one of which was a start. Hasn't scored, hasn't assisted. He's been just dreadful. Maybe it's not the greatest of choices because there wasn't exactly much expectation there. But it just from not necessarily his fault because he's just not good enough. But as a club, that signing really is a marker of where Krasnodar are right now and the mire that they've got themselves in. Sergei Galitsky's dream is to have a team of academy talents. Well, Krasnodar have got one of the oldest average-aged starting 11s in the entirety of the RPL this season. And at one point had more Zenit Academy players in the team than Krasnodar Academy players. They really need to fix that. And I think the signing of Markov is just in microcosm a nice summary of all of Krasnodar's current issues and what they need to avoid to try and get out of their mire and do what they were doing. David, we're signing this season?
I actually had Markov in my shortlist as well. Perhaps unsurprisingly, considering how bad he was. You could have also included probably Yonov and Chernov as well from Krasnodar, but I didn't. I have Rajkovic at Lokomotiv, Zeluish also from Lokomotiv, and meme of the year, Adolfo Gajic.
God, of course.
I thought about a couple of others, I'm not putting Bruno Fuchs in there, despite the price. I'm basing worst on their actual performances rather than
injury,
them being a waste of money, and the fact that he was injured. So I'll let him off. Hard to choose between. Zeluic was big money and he did very little. Let's be honest. And I sort of got to give credit to Rajkovic because I'm pretty sure he was a big player in that game where Loco did get a point against one of the big 2 teams in the Champions League. He had that one good game and then did nothing else. So I think I probably have to go with Zeluish or Markov.
Yeah, I must admit, because Gajic had left so soon for Benevento, I totally forgot about Gajic and just how bloody terrible he was. And of course, Gonch loves his big man up top. He personally handpicked Gajic to be signed for Siska last summer. Against the advice of the club, believing that he wouldn't fit Siska's system, and Gonch wanted him as like a plan B option. But whenever he played him, he didn't play him as a plan B. He just continued his plan A, but instead he had a big guy, totally unsuited to the style of football, not really intelligent enough, still hadn't settled in whatsoever, and was really struggling to settle in, to be fair to him. So it's a little bit of a weird transfer. And of course, Gonch has now followed up his proclivity to sign big men by bringing in Rondon at Krasnodar. Not officially, I don't believe, is it? But going to happen sooner rather than later. Richard, worst signing of the season for you?
Yeah, I was going to say Rajkovic would have been up there, but again, he came on a free. So I guess when Lokomotiv signed Rajkovic, I think it was because they'd let Solomon Kvirkvellia go on loan to Rotor, and that's probably a candidate for, again, another poor signing, because it's crazy how much he's declined, hasn't it? Kvaratskhelia, in 3 years he's gone from being a totem for Lokomotiv, the leader of that defence that won the league, to being relegated with Rotor. Just it's staggering, his decline. I guess with Rajkovic, he was poor, yes, I definitely will say that, but at least he came on a free transfer. And like David, I'll pass on Bruno Fuchs for the time being because of his injury issues. It's frustrating, of course, given the amount of money CSKA paid for him, but he did have that bad injury, so I think he's one of those who we've got to reserve judgment on, and hopefully he'll be back next season as CSKA continue to rebuild. To me, it's got to be Gaish. Like I say, the fact that Goncharenko requested that signing, and he was getting some decent raps in South American football. The price tag, and he just didn't look very good at all. I mean, admittedly, I think part of it was probably Goncharenko perhaps just sticking to a plan A and not really, utilising him in a different way, not putting him in a 2 with Chalov up front. And even worse for CSKA now is, I've just read the other day, yesterday, that after Torino's draw against Lazio midweek, it means now that Benevento's relegation to Serie B was confirmed. So they're getting relegated from Serie A to Serie B next season. So the chances of Benevento now exercising that purchase option on Gaish are pretty much non-existent. I really doubt they'll be able to afford him in Serie B. So he's going to be a millstone round CSKA's neck again next season. Obviously, they're probably going to have to end up farming him out on loan again somewhere else. So it's just that's the double whammy of transfers like that. When they don't work out, you've got to just pray the team that you sell them to, he's a success there, or that they stay up or something like that, or qualify for Europe. Like, at least with Dinamo, Maximilian Philippe was a bit of a disaster, but Wolfsburg look like they're going to get in the Champions League, so they can afford to dig Dinamo out of the hole there. But Gaish, and make Phillips' loan move permanent. But whereas Benevento's relegation now means Gaish is probably going to end up back at CSKA, and who knows what Olic has in store. The fact that they're on about the fact that they've decided to buy Zabolotny means now that his career's in a bit of limbo now, Gaish. So it's got to be Gaish, I think. Although there was a few honourable mentions, like I said, with Rajkovic, but I think for the fee and for the fact that the coach requested him and the fact that he just looks so out of place, I'm going to go with Adolfo Gaish.
Yeah, I think that's certainly fair enough. It's not surprising that CSKA are going to be dominating quite a lot of the disappointing sections and worst sections of awards that take place in Russian football media and such this season. But we'll move on to best moment, and I will start off by combining my best and worst moment into one little category. You're both more than welcome to single them out if you'd like to, but my best moment is Spartak signing Shamil Gazizov at the start of the season. And worst moment is Spartak firing Shamil Gazizov in the middle of the season. What a farce. What an absolute farce from start to end. I remember writing an article on the site regarding the signing of Gazizov and imploring that he would be given time to introduce his style and his ways and his method, because you can't create a long-term plan overnight. The idea of a long-term plan is that it takes a long time to build for a long time to then reap the benefits of. And I know there's different and awkward rumours behind the scenes about what happened and potential tapping up of players and potential pushing up of fees and then conflict between the board and Gazizov and other members of the board and so on about abuse of his power. And abuse, I mean, as in overreaching of his power. But he is the sporting director. What the hell did Fedun expect? Just another puppet? I mean, probably, honestly, yes. It's a shame that he wasn't given more of a chance, just because Spartak fans didn't like the fact that Uranov had a unibrow or didn't look like a Spartak player. What the hell does a Spartak player look like? And that was one thing that they really held against Gazizov, because they brought in Uranov as his little pet, as they called him, and he didn't play very well. It's like, neither of which were given a chance to prove themselves. And it must have been also sweet for him to then return to Ufa to oversee a 3-0 win, which essentially all but ended Spartak's title challenge. So it's a little bit of karma there. And don't even get me started on the whole Zarema Salikova joining the board to be personal assistant and runner of the club, whatever the hell it is, personal, I don't know. It's all just a mess, and it's embarrassing and depressingly not surprising. That's why it's not big a surprise, because it's totally expected. If we had an award for like the annual Spartak fucking their season up award, this would be it for this season. Thankfully, because of the quality of players on the pitch and quality of staff and the backroom staff, they managed to get in the Champions League. But off the pitch, it's a total mess, and it all stems with, of course, who else but Leonid Fadoon. David, best moment of the season?
On a personal level, I mean, Ruben had a couple of really crazy wins, a couple of last-minute wins against CSKA and Zenit, but the win that stood out the most was our recent one against Arsenal 2-0 down at half-time. We came back to win 4-2, and it was a crucial point of the season. It basically all but guaranteed us the top 5 spot. And at half-time, I did not think we had it in us, but we did. They came out and we scored 4 goals in the second half, and I was jumping around the room pretty much every time we scored. I definitely am celebrating goals with a lot more passion this season. So that was definitely up there. In a general level, I think seeing Krasnodar get their first win in the Champions League groups earlier in the season against Rennes, they really struggled obviously with injury, and they performed. Let's be honest, they still performed fairly well in the group stages with the weak squad. They obviously dropped winning positions against Sevilla twice, I think, 2-0 up away from home and lost 3-2 and things like that. But with the squads they were putting out, they put in a really good effort. Drew away at Chelsea, drew away at Rennes as well, and then finally getting that win and qualifying from the third spot into the Europa League. Obviously, they then lost, but that was a big moment for Russian football. A big highlight in a poor overall European season.
And Richard, best moment?
I've got a few candidates. Happy to see Rubin and Sochi freshen up the European contingent. Like I say, we've been crying out for some good coaches to represent clubs in our clubs in European competition, and those two in Fedotov and Slutsky, definitely super coaches. I think that they with some decent transfers this summer, I think they both have a chance, and with a decent draw, both could get to the group stages, and maybe even one of them get through beyond the group stages into the knockout rounds of the Conference League. Fingers crossed, hopefully. A couple of other moments. A brave decision by the Dinamo board to go with Sandro Schwartz as manager. I really like the way that Buvac, he definitely would have had a part to play in Schwartz's appointment. And a bit disappointing at the end there, but I really want to see Schwartz in the summer with the chance to bring in his own players now. Alongside Buvac, really refreshed Dinamo. And I don't think they're a million miles off, just need a couple of signings in crucial positions, and I'm happy with the direction the club's taken and with the way that Schwartz has given young players like Chukavin and Zakayan chances in the first team. I'm going to actually go a bit further back than David. I thought the group stage was very good with Krasnodar, but I'm going to also shout out to probably my best moment of the season was Krasnodar getting those 2 wins against PAOK in the qualifying, because especially how it had fallen apart the season before against Olympiacos. We were all saying, last season as well, when they beat Porto in the penultimate qualifying round, we thought, yeah, brilliant, they got Olympiacos, and we thought, great, they can beat Porto, brilliant, they can beat Olympiacos, and we were so disappointed with how Olympiacos outplayed them over 2 legs. I honestly thought when that draw was made and they got PAOK, obviously historically they're not as successful a club as Olympiacos are in Greece, but they had just come off the back of a previous qualification round win against Benfica, and I was really shocked at that result. I really was not expecting PAOK to beat Benfica. So then I thought I was going to go, oh, here we go, deja vu, here we go again. They're going to lose to the Greek side, and the fact that PAOK have beaten Benfica shows that they're absolutely no mugs whatsoever. But I was really impressed with the way Krasnodar handled that tie. They were juggling injuries and a short summer break, and they did really, really well to get through that tie against PAOK and win both legs. And then obviously, to tag along, onto that, what David mentioned about the group stages for Krasnodar, point away against Chelsea, point away against Rennes in testing circumstances, and then that victory at home against Rennes. They're probably my best moments of the season, I would say, overall.
And then I sense perhaps a theme coming up here, but David, worst moment of the season? Is it maybe related to that too?
My personal worst was Ruben had an awful match against Kimki at one point. But the general European performance from the rest of the Russian teams was obviously pretty dreadful. Krasnodar were lucky, let's be honest, considering their situation, to get past the groups, at which point obviously Russia would have had no one past the groups. The Russian European performances, again, hugely disappointing. The whole anti-ref stuff going on at the start of the season, particularly Spartak fans sort of believing that the refs were against them, despite there being wild decisions in lots of games, was annoying. Let's just say the least. The poor me situation going on. So that was annoying, and the European and that was sort of my two worst moments probably, or least favourite moments.
I think I've just found a new worst moment. Some breaking news of Alexander Grigorian being Alexander Grigorian. So he has been homophobic again and has released some pretty incendiary statements defending his continued homophobia regarding women's football, despite the fact that he is a manager of a women's football team. So I'm not going to give him any airtime. I'm not going to read out his comments. Go find them yourselves. They are absolutely disgraceful. Nothing short of it. Anyway, Richard, worst moment?
Probably go to the start of the season for me. I'd probably say Dynamo Moscow's embarrassing loss against Lokomotiv Tbilisi in the second qualifying round of the Europa League. Just outright, just a terrible performance. Just under Kirill Novikov, just not good at all. Just a dreadful display. And it sort of just set the tone, didn't it, for the whole performances in Europe to just be pretty dreadful on the whole. At least one good thing did come out of it, though, and the fact that, Schwartz is now in there at Dynamo and we're starting to see progression and a more progressive style of playing young players. But yeah, just an embarrassing night, full stop, because I didn't really expect a huge amount from Dynamo this season. They would have drawn Granada had they got through that round, and Granada have shown this season how good they are in Europe by getting to the quarterfinals. So I think they probably would have lost that game, but to not get through at least one round was just a real low point. So yeah, I'll probably go with that. I'll probably go with Dynamo's embarrassing loss to Lokomotiv Tbilisi.
Yeah, highly embarrassing, especially when you consider that. I mean, back in the Soviet days, Dynamo Tbilisi were a real force to be reckoned with, one of the most successful sides in the Vysshaya Liga at the time. Lokomotiv Tbilisi don't have that history. Lokomotiv Tbilisi don't really have that good of a side right now compared to some of their similar minnows, to treat them without too much disrespect. But Dynamo's performance was absolutely horrendous. And it was really a watermark as well for what we were going to see for the rest of the European season with regard to the Russian slant. But we'll now get to our last of this season category, which is goal of the season, before moving on to two probably slightly shorter and little more comedic and jokey ones. But goal of the season for me is Kamran Aliyev. It was for Khimki against Arsenal, and it was I don't know if anyone can recall who was listening, but it was a wonderful solo run where he took it past about 5 or 6 Arsenal Tula players, including a nice little Cruyff turn, and then a little step over before shuffling it into the far bottom corner. And it was the mazy run that was totally out of nowhere and was just absolutely brilliant. That really impressed me. I did consider quite a few others. Jordan Larson's long ranger, the free kick. Kavicha's 20-30 yard hit against Sochi. Kavicha's overhead kick. We were looking before the game, and there's so many very good goals of high quality this year. But I've always been a little bit of a fan of these mazy runs, like, the typical Messi sort of run. That's kind of what it was like. That sort of slalom in and out, nice few little steps of little trickery and manoeuvres, and then hits it, beats the keeper down low on the far side, rather than a long range effort. I mean, I am a fan of a League One team in England who are pretty shit and score a lot of long-range goals. And if I look at a goal and think, Sunderland player could score that, and I'm not that impressed by it. But yeah, I think Aliyev's was brilliant. And I will tweet out these in a thread when we do alongside the podcast, so as a little reminder for the goals. But David, your goal of the season?
Mine was fairly straightforward. And for me, was Denis Makarov's solo effort against Zenit in the 93rd minute to win the match. I think we've all seen it. It went pretty viral for a number of reasons. The goal was good, but also the quality of the pitch on that day was. I think it's kind to even call it a pitch. Long ball up the pitch, and it was him versus Dejan Lovren and Douglas Santos, and he sat them both down 2 or 3 times with a few chops, slots it into the corner, Ruben win the game, and it was a great goal, and obviously it meant a lot for me as a Ruben fan. So that was my goal of the season, and the fact that it was against Zenit as well was an even bigger factor.
It was also quite funny from my perspective to see him mug off Lovren twice like that. But Richard, what was your goal of the season? Are you going to go for a long-range blammer?
I am going to go for a long-range one, yes. So actually, mine is there was a little bit of a mazy dribbling run in the build-up to it. I'm going to go with Nikola Vlasic's against Zenit right at the start of the season. I think it was on match day 3. I think he just takes the ball on the halfway, just dribbles it 15, 20 yards up the pitch, and I think he just cuts inside, and I think Barrios is just about to close him down, and I think he just then unleashes a shot right beyond Mikhail Kurtzkov into the corner. It was a lovely, lovely strike. So yeah, I'm going to go with that one from Vlasic. It was from about 20, 25 yards out. Lovely, lovely strike. And yeah, the Makarov one against Zenit was good as well. I love the way he controlled that ball, kept the ball under his control on that cabbage patch of a pitch. It was just dreadful. And just the way he just made a complete mug out of Dejan Lovren and Douglas Santos was good. Another one I'm going to shout out for Makarov too was the late winner against CSKA. I thought, that was a really good shot to beat Akinfeev. He got it right into the corner because Akinfeev didn't react too late. He dove just about right, but he just couldn't quite keep it out because it was such an accurate shot into the bottom corner. And I think also that goal was quite interesting with Makarov. I think that really sparked the season that he had because he was obviously just finding his feet before then in the RPL, and I think that goal really set the tone for his season. Because he's another one who's one of the candidates for most improved player of the year. He's had a super season, Makarov, and so that one. In addition to his strike against Zenit, I'm going to go with that one too against CSKA because it was a lovely goal and it won Ruben 3 points as well at the end. Another goal in injury time.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. It was a real joy to watch Vlasic at the start of the season and most of the season until the last 7 or 8 games when CSKA really fell away. And do you remember when CSKA were in a title race and they were actually second in the league?
Feels like ions ago, doesn't it?
They aren't in Europe for the... Yeah, now they're not in Europe for the first time in 20 years. It's real testament to how good of a job Ivica Olic has done there, hey? But we're going to move on now to the last 2 categories. And first off is the most Leonid Slutsky moment of the decade. And of course, unless you've been living under a rock, you will have seen Ruben's brilliant recent video that's went viral of for Slutsky's 50th birthday, in which the entirety of the squad all get up and sing, and the backroom staff and so on sing and throughout the years in various get-ups, and it's absolutely brilliant. But in lieu of that, we're going to honour that brilliant video and Slutsky himself for a great season, and by discussing some of his biggest moments of the decade. So some nominations. First of all is the Christmas Carol from Ruben obviously Christmas, when Slutsky himself was singing a very, very funny Christmas Carol. The dance from Ruben qualifying for the Conference League on the video that was shared on the Twitter and the other socials. Of course, the 50th birthday song. His dance from 2016, which went viral. Danny Armstrong of RT and former RFN he tweeted it out, and it's been picked up by Sport Express and various other places, where Slutsky himself is dancing on stage with 4 women. When he fell out of a tree to save a cat and subsequently retired from football. Now, that's not quite a decade, but it's a brilliant Slutsky moment. Shouting at Zherkov when manager of Russia, which Yuri Zherkov tweeted that one out. A video of Slutsky absolutely laying into them, and Zherkov kind of just sitting there sick of his life, and just shows a totally different side of the man. And last but not least, that time at Hull when he told Mick McCarthy he'd rather commit suicide rather than manage a club for as long as a time as Mick did. So this is Mick McCarthy was at the time Ipswich manager in the English Championship. He recalled at the end of the season when he left the club, or fired from the club, he had a conversation with Slutsky privately after a game once. And when Slutsky asked him, Slutsky essentially mentioned, you've been managing for 20 years, and said that that's suicide and that he would never do that, which is beautifully forward from Slutsky. But David, what do you think? What's your favourite Leonid Slutsky moment?
My favourite is actually the newest video, the video that the club made for his 50th birthday. He actually, barely features. He actually didn't see it until there was a big party in Moscow this weekend. All the squad were there, a number of big names and faces from Russia, Russian football and Russia in general were there. And that was the first time he'd seen the video in full, sat there at that party. He'd filmed a small segment for the end, but there was no music playing. They didn't tell him anything else. And he'd recorded vocals for one segment. So, but the video is fantastic. When I first watched it, and then the first segment comes in, it's like an old 60s Russian track. And I thought, oh, this is weird. And then I noticed that the 3 guys singing were actually Rubin's players, Gritsenko, Zotov and Kostyakov. I was immediately sort of enamored with the video. And then it just goes on, and it's just fantastic. Carl Stolfelt as a blonde-haired 80s guitarist in a ballad. You've got the backroom staff doing a 90s pop punk rock record, which is my favourite, honestly, seeing Yarovinsky, Kuzmin and Veretennikov do that and the song, I never heard it before. It's a great track. Then you've got Oleg Shatov, who's historically this really quiet guy, coming out and singing this 2000s pop track in the middle. And then it ends with them doing the famous song Tight Lyod, a rap song from the 21st century, with all the squad, all the previous characters there. We had Timur Bayramov was masked up and playing the role of Slutsky in that one, because they obviously didn't want Slutsky to know what was going on.
Was that Timur?
Yeah, so Tim, obviously we did an interview with him on the site. He was at Lokomotiv as part of the media team, but it's back at Rubin. And that was him. So, it was just brilliant. And I mean, it's not going to go as viral, obviously, because it's a lot largely in Russian. It's mainly for the Russian audience and those who know the Russian football stuff. But I thought it was fantastic, and the production quality as well, just brilliant. The team there are doing a great job. So yeah, that's my choice.
Yeah, I love the 90s new metal bit, where it was kind of like a piss take of of Blink 182. A little bit of AFI, and then Heaven is a Half Pipe in there as well. I
wasn't sure what any of the things were, but then I all the little segments they do are recreations of the original music videos, which is a great little nod as well. I had no idea, but I went and watched all the original songs, and it's like, damn, they've really put in some, as far as I'm aware, it took them 3 months to make the whole thing. It was a brilliant effort.
I also refuse to admit that was Kuzmin on drums, because he's aged about 15 years since he retired a year ago. He looks really old, but it's absolutely brilliant. Who's the other pop? The only one I didn't really recognize. Who's the pop singer next to Starfelt?
Zuyev. It was Zuyev. Alexander Zuyev.
Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah. He's the one. So Rubin's sort of song for the year has been "Life Is Life." Old sort of 80s anthem track. And I believe it was him who made it popular amongst the squad when he sung it as his initiation track. And sort of after every game that Rubin wins, they put a clip up on their Instagram of them singing that song in the changing room. So Zuev's obviously got a bit of a knack and a bit of a like for the old 80s pop. So they had him in singing in English, to be fair, as well, for that one. So yeah, that was unbelievably Alexander Zoyev.
That's why I didn't recognise it. I was like, who the hell is that with the big stupid wig and singing in pretty good English as well? But whoever thought that Alexander Zoyev would be a big fan of Opus? Richard, what's your Leonid Slutsky moment of the season?
I absolutely love that video. It's between the latest video and the Christmas Carol, the All I Want for Christmas rendition. I'm still going to go for the All I Want for Christmas rendition because obviously that attracted really, global attention to it. I've listened to podcasts where it was mentioned, podcasts about football in general, other leagues other than Russia, and the big leagues and everything, and even people on those podcasts referenced it when it was done. I thought that was just brilliant, and there was some really funny bits in that as well. I really liked, for example, the dig at VAR when they passed the cookies round with the referees, the gingerbread men cookies round with referees, and when the referee with the VAR screen, their head was bit off. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. It was this sly little dig at one of the referees and VAR, which I thought was absolutely funny as well. And some of the scenes in the video, I think it was Huang and one of the Rubin Russian players, I think, eating the Russian potato salad under the. I thought that was good, and one or two of the little bits of it too, which I remember quite funny. Kavicha doing the different, changing of the different shirts. I think wearing a Juve kit, a Barcelona kit. I think it was one or two others too. I thought that was good as well. Obviously, all the transfer speculation now seems more apt now, given all the interest that's been drummed up in him since the last international break. But on the recent one to celebrate Slutsky's 50th birthday, my favourite bits were the Zuyev and Starfelt duet. I really enjoyed Shatov's moment too. That was in the pop rapping. That was quite good. So yeah, they're my two favourite moments from the most recent video. And hats off to Rubin's social media team. That's a superb job with those two videos. It's really raised some good positive feedback from everybody, and both of them really, really good. But I'm just going to go with the Christmas Carol version. I thought it was just brilliant. Great vocals, and I love some of the references and anecdotes and digs that they had it was great. Both of them great, but I'm just going to go with the Christmas Carol one.
Yeah, definitely. Props to the social media team, both English and Russian, because we've got some colleagues and friends who work with them on the social media side of things, and Rubin have really been on the top of the game this season. Actually, in general, Zenit were the first to really, really develop social media in Russia, and credit to Zenit for doing it in English anyway. And the rest are really coming along nicely and really going above and beyond. Obviously, we've got Spartak, where everything they do now is viral on football Twitter, and the graphics as well Spartak make when obviously Volgograd returning to the RPL for the first time in like 16 years or whatever, and Bido big in the 90s. So when Spartak played Rotter away, they had that whole Y2K theme where it was all like OG Windows 95 related, and there was like the old ridiculous like Java GIFs and the Flash GIFs that was all themed around the lineup and the promotions, and then the tweets of the game and the live updates, and then of course this by Rubin. It's all really is helping a lot from the outside in terms of marketing and increasing the transparency around of the league around the world. But my most Slutsky moment is, and probably forever will be, the fact that he retired from football because he fell out of a tree saving a cat. Just imagine in like 1990, I think it happened.
I think it was around that time. Yeah.
Your medium age Leonid, like little old Leonid, you've just retired from Zvezda Golodish, and he's like knocking about Volgograd. He's just like walking, minding his business in Volgograd, and someone sees him and it's like, Leo, why did he retire? And he's like, well, I climbed up a tree to get a cat to help it back down and fell out of the tree and broke my leg in 6 different places and had to retire. Hey, you can't write that. I think the most ridiculous thing you'll ever hear in your life.
Yeah.
But with Slutsky, it kind of makes sense. Like Slutsky himself is mental. I mean, he's not only one of the most accomplished managers in Russia, he's a wonderful human, who can also be a bit of a bastard at times, as the Zhirkov video shows. A great sport who's very funny. I mean, all of the stuff that he's done off camera and that is just shows what he's like. Hull fans absolutely adored him, despite the fact he was pretty bad from a footballing perspective, which is usually like do or die. And it's just so Slutsky that he would do that and put himself in that position to risk his own career. It's so ridiculous. But if we will go on to the last category, which is another nominated category, and it is the most bankrupt club of the last decade. Now, this isn't so much a laughing matter as the last one is. It's more so very depressing. But the idea is to kind of highlight some of the financial struggles that clubs go through and compare how these clubs are. Now, we have 5 nominations, which are Tambov, Anzhi, Amkar, Tosna, and Akhmat Grozny. Now, hearing those nominations, you might hear a little bit of an outlier. Akhmat are Bankrupt. Now, Akhmat have been nominated, and they are my choice for the most bankrupt club of the last decade, because while Tambov, Anzhi, Amkar, and Tosna literally went bankrupt financially, Akhmat are morally bankrupt, totally and utterly morally bankrupt, to the extent that they are run by a dictator. So, for me, Akhmat are the most bankrupt club of the last decade. David?
I mean, if we're going financials, it's Tambov. I mean, at least Anzhi had youth players when they were struggling and could play youth players. Amkar and Tosna at least made it to the end of the seasons with their full squads. Tambov had to rely on loans to actually finish the season. Like, they didn't even have youth players available. So, I mean, it's definitely them.
Yeah, it is. Joking aside, without a shadow of a doubt. I don't think we've seen a club. I mean, we've all seen stories. I mean, Tom had to use the youth players, Anzhi had to use the youth. Other sides like Yenisei and Scar had to play different locations during the course of the season. Other clubs had games postponed due to financial issues. Other clubs like Luch couldn't pay the players. All sorts of different variety of issues, but Tambov had every single one this season, and I really feel sorry for their fans, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who will be hurt most by this. But it's a little bit of a warning, because too many local governments, regional governments, see football as expendable, and unfortunately, when you have that in an unsustainable economy, Tambov is the result. And until we do increase the financial support and safety net to some of these smaller clubs, we will continue to get these year after year. But I digress anyway. Richard's most bankrupt club?
Very last word from me. I'll expand on what both of you guys have said there, and just I'm going to go with Tambov in terms of financials, because not only that, like David said, at least the other clubs didn't have to rely on the other clubs that we've had on our shortlist didn't have to rely on other RPL clubs loaning them players. Tom had to use their youth players, and at least with Amkar and Anzhi, they actually played in their own stadiums. Tambov, it's honestly, you ask anybody from Tambov and who was a fan of the team before they came to the RPL, and they'll probably just sit back and look at the last 2 years and think, what just a complete waste. We basically never got to see our side play in Tambov. I feel sorry for the local community there. You had no, that sense of big occasion. We all follow English football. We know on FA Cup third round day, when someone like Marine early this season played Tottenham, the fact that you had the likes of Harry Kane, etc., coming to Marine to play, and it was frustrating that game couldn't have been held with spectators. But, just the whole sense of community around it, just these big stars are coming to town, and it would have felt like that for the people of Tambov, when the likes of Zenit, Spartak, these big teams come to town, and the fact that they never even got the chance to watch their team play in their home stadium, in their home city, it really just, in a time when for Tambov, obviously the pandemics, we're only just now in other countries outside of Russia seeing fans return to stadiums, so it's been a really nomadic existence really for fans over the last 12 months. We've all been consigned at home watching our team on streams, on television, etc., and so forth. But for Tambov, it's like even pre-pandemic, it was kind of like that as well, because they had to just sit and watch on television, and because they were playing away, and any fan who dared make the trips to Saransk and Nizhny Novgorod every single home quote unquote home game that they had to play. They're a brave fan, and I'll give them that for dedication. There can't have been many of them. So yeah, and all I can say with their Tambov thing is just a farce from minute one, and I just hope they can have a Phoenix club form though. I mean, Amcar recently today just relaunched, didn't they, as a professional club? They've been given a PFL third-tier PFL license for next season, so that's fantastic to see them back. And I hope a Phoenix Tambov club can be formed, and they can build their way back up nice and slow in the PFL. And just so the fans there, who they probably were getting a couple of thousand attendances before they got promoted to the RPL and all this farce happened, at least those fans then can have a team to support again and they can build themselves back up. But yeah, it has to be Tambov from a financial, geographical, and kind of everything kind of mentality. Really, it has to be them. It has to be them. But hopefully they can get a Phoenix club like Amcar have done.
Yeah, I really wanted to just mention this because to highlight the financial plight of these smaller clubs, because it's an absolute shame and it's a shambles that so many go out of business year in, year out in this country. And part of it is due to a lack of regulation and structure down for the lower leagues in particular, but also part of it is just it's very difficult because without increased overseas TV money, there's real difficult way of trying to convince foreign investment, which is private investment will be the kind of golden ticket to solving this issue, because we've said it before that a lot of the clubs in this country live within a Soviet hangover, but instead of a sporting society, they just replaced that funding in that system with a regional government instead. Look at SKA Khabarovsk. They were part of the SISKA Sporting Society, hence SKA, and now they just replaced that entire entity with the regional government, still being run from the exact same building that the former Sporting Society in Khabarovsk was based in. So it's I just need to highlight that hopefully with more regulation, with increased funding, the ever-increasing popularity, hopefully in time this would be solved. But right now it seems worse than ever, and especially Tambov's case, I agree wholeheartedly. I think a Phoenix club is needed for their fans. I think you probably will see one. There's been more and more rising up all over the country in recent years with the Sabir, Kuban, Amcar, as you said, all over the place. I mean, there's rumours even still about Angie potentially returning again. Not Angie, sorry. Is it Luch potentially returning again? But lots of clubs going out of business, and it needs to end. It's not a laughing matter, to be quite honest, and it is a little bit of a shame. But anyway, that is the end of this week's podcast. As I mentioned at the start, keep an ear out for next week, as we will do a little shorter version of this for the Finna L and in exploring some of the players of the season, manager and surprise packages. It will be, like I say, considerably shorter because of separate vacations, and then after that we will reconvene for a more regular length episodes in which we will pick our team of the season. So some exciting stuff ahead, and as always, I'll see you at the same time next week. This has been the RFN Podcast. Goodbye for now.
Идет футбольный матч, летит над полем мяч. Веди его, беги, точнее его ударь. Но мяч берет ноги решительный вратарь. Не напрасно футбольное поле самых ловких и смелых влечет. Здесь нужны тренировка и воля, быстрота, увлечение, расчет.